Good morning. As have been introduced, I am Choi Young-chul, professor at Chungbuk National University. Pleased to meet you. We do have simultaneous interpretation services available, so rather than speaking in English, I would like to proceed in Korean, which is the more comfortable language for me. First of all, here at the 2023 새마을 International Forum, it is indeed a great privilege for me to serve as the moderator for the first session. Personally and academically, I have been researching 새마을운동 and I have had much interest for 새마을운동, and I look forward to this learning opportunity for myself as well. We are here at session 1 titled Going Local, Residents' Happiness and 새마을운동. Personally, when I have opportunities to participate in international symposiums outside of Korea, I find that international scholars are much more interested in 새마을운동 compared to Korean scholars. I hope that this year's forum will be an opportunity for all of us to take a deep dive into 새마을운동, both in theory and in practice. We have 3 speakers and 3 panelists. We will be covering the awareness of 새마을운동, then go on to the utilization of digital platforms, and last but not least, the future directions for the Gyeongsang-buk-do province. First, let me introduce our 3 speakers. We have with us Director Lee Sang-woo from the 새마을 Foundation. We also have with us Deputy Director Kwon Young-min from the 새마을 Foundation, and also Research Fellow Lee Dong-hyung from the Gyeongsang-buk-do Development Institute. We also have 3 discussants joining us today. Professor Seo Jae-ho of Pugyong University, Professor Lee Yang-soo of Yeongnam University, and Mr. Chae Young-taek, who is the editor of Daegu Daily. Due to the time constraint, we will listen to all 3 presentations, and then we will follow that up with the discussion. So we will have all 3 presentations consecutively, and then we will follow that up with the discussants. And if time allows, we will also be accepting feedback from the floor as well. Without further ado, let us invite our first presenter. We would like to ask you to limit your presentations to 15 to 20 minutes, and for discussants, 5 to 7 minutes. And hopefully that will allow us to open the floor for further feedback.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Lee Sang-woo from the 새마을 Foundation. Now, for the 새마을 운동, in other countries from the OECD and also other developing countries, they are highly interested and they're also asking for support. But then in the case of Korea, so inside Korea, there is actually low awareness or misunderstanding about 새마을운동. So we wanted to understand the public's understanding of 새마을운동 so that we can also try to make improvement where necessary. And also based on this set of results, perhaps we could also come up with policies or ways to promote 새마을운동 as well. So I thought that this was part of what was necessary for us to keep evolving 새마을운동. So then today I would like to share with you the results of the National Awareness Survey, and then based on the results that I'm about to share with you, I would also like to explain about the ways forward. Now, the background to this survey is, as I have mentioned earlier, There is high interest overseas in 새마을운동, but not so in Korea. There is low interest inside Korea, but then what we need is a strong foundation inside Korea for us to have a strong promotion of 새마을운동 in other countries as well. So we need to solidify the 새마을운동 foundation inside Korea. And also inside Korea, there is a tendency to see this as just a legacy of the past. And also more recently, we see that there's a lot of misunderstanding about 새마을운동, or those who are not aware of it at all. And also there are generational differences in terms of the understanding of 새마을운동. So we wanted to get a better understanding into the public's perceptions and understanding about 새마을운동, so that based on this we can also come up with the policies or recommendations on how to move forward. Now the design of the survey, this is based on the resident registration as of July 2023. Sample size of total 2,400 individuals, 1,200 individuals nationwide from 17 metropolitan cities and provinces, and the sampling method was square root proportional allocation by gender, region, and age group, followed by minimum sample allocation in each interval. And the period was for about 1 month, from August 23 to September 11, and the survey agency was called Metrics B and C. And the survey contents, so first about the demographics, for example, gender, area of residence, and then awareness and need for 새마을운동. So for example, awareness and favorability, purpose and effects of 새마을운동, revitalization level, and whether to join 새마을운동. And then last part of the questions were on the policy development needs, for example, current issues of the local community and how 새마을운동 can contribute to the development of the community by addressing these issues. Now this is the survey sample. Again, nationwide, 1,200, and then Gyeongbuk Province, 1,200, and then we allocated them by region, by county, district, and so forth. So then first about the awareness of 새마을운동. As you can see here, the national average is about 3.65. Gyeongbuk average is 4.0, meaning that 6 to 7 out of 10 population knew about 새마을운동, and the older they are, then they knew about it, but then the younger generation had lower awareness. And also Gyeongbuk Province had a higher awareness than the national average. And then next is about the image of 새마을운동. So we asked them about what you are reminded of when you hear 새마을운동. And then nationwide, the 새마을 spirit was the highest. And then rural development president. So these were some of the images associated with 새마을운동. But then now in Gyeongbuk, then president was the most common image, followed by the 새마을 flag or logo, housing improvement, and so forth. So then from 2010 survey, then the image associated with president was very high. But in this case, nationwide, we can see 새마을 spirit or the rural development ranked higher than the image of the president. But then again, in Gyeongbuk province, still the image of the president was the highest. And also what other differences are, like for example, in the 20s, among the 20s generation, then the 새마을 flag and logo was quite highly recognized among the younger generation. So we see that the young generation are still seeing 새마을운동 as a remnant or legacy of the past. And then next is about their favorability of 새마을운동. And then like it or very like it was high, especially in Gyeongbuk province. And then next was about their 새마을운동 experience. And then they say they have been exposed to it through the media. I have heard about it from people around me, learned about it through school education. I have also directly witnessed. And you see that those who have participated in 새마을운동 activities, a lot of them in Gyeongbuk. And then also I learned about it from school, so also quite high in Gyeongbuk. But then this percentage is low nationwide. So we can see that the 새마을운동 education is more frequent in Gyeongbuk province, but not so nationwide. And then the next question was about their thinking about the degree of 새마을운동's contribution to national development. And you see that the positive response is quite high, especially in Gyeongbuk province. So it has contributed a lot, is over 35%. And then the purpose of 새마을운동 was the next question. And then it was about economic development or rural development and quality of life improvement, comprehensive growth of the nation. So you see that these were some of the most commonly picked answers. So especially in nationwide, then they thought that this was for rural development. But then in Gyeongbuk province, we see that more of them picked economic development as the purpose of 새마을운동. And then the next was about the degree of 새마을운동 effect or the impact. So then nationwide, improvement of rural life and residents' participation were high, but in Gyeongbuk, economic development and also improvement of rural life. So these were picked as the biggest impact of 새마을운동. And this is about the perception on the current degree of 새마을운동 activeness. And you see that it was highly negative, meaning that most thought that it was not active. So we see that not active is higher than active, and especially in Gyeongbuk. So in Gyeongbuk, there is a higher negative response, and that is perhaps due to the higher expectation in Gyeongbuk about 새마을운동. So what they're seeing is not up to their expectation. And perhaps that is the reason why we have this higher negative response in Gyeongbuk. And also probably because they are not aware of the current activities. And then the next question was about the need to strengthen 새마을운동 in the future. And again, we can see that there is a need to strengthen 새마을운동. So there are quite a lot of people who are in agreement to the need to strengthen 새마을운동. So if we can come up with the policies that can do that, then I believe that that would be quite effective. And the next question was about the willingness to participate in 새마을운동 if it is implemented. And again, we can see that the positive response was quite high. So for the citizens, they have the perception that there is a need to strengthen 새마을운동, and if it is activated, then many of them are willing to participate. And then also, this was a question about the degree of awareness about 새마을운동 being undertaken overseas. And we could see that there is a very high percentage of not being aware of this. So even regarding the Korean ODA programs, you can see that the awareness is falling. So this also points to the need for us to communicate more about such overseas projects, including 새마을운동, to both the Gyeongbuk provincial population as well as nationwide. And next is the need to expand 새마을운동. And you can see that the positive response is much higher than negative. So if we can have more communication, then I believe that this perception will even grow. And also we can see that a lot of the population are in agreement on the need to expand 새마을운동 overseas. And next is about the evaluation on the current issues of the local community. Now first, about the current issues of the local community, and an overwhelming majority picked population aging as the most serious issue of the local community, and especially in Gyeongbuk province, we can see that this percentage is even higher. And then followed by improvement in the living environment and educational environment as well. So these were some of the local issues that have been observed. And then the next question was about the degree of 새마을운동's contribution to solving current problems of the community. And then most of the responses were about improving the perception. So that is nationwide, but then in Gyeongbu region, there was more focus on revitalizing local economy. So again, we see that Gyeongbuk province, there is a high perception about 새마을운동 promoting local economy. And given this, I believe that perhaps we can also lead this to the local economy in the form of job creation for the young and so forth. And then next question was on the goals that 새마을운동 must aim at achieving. Now for nationwide, then it was about improving quality of life, rural development, and economic development. So these were some of the most frequently picked answers. But then for Gyeongbuk, then economic growth and rural development and quality of life improvement. So you see that in Gyeongbuk province, again, there is quite a lot of focus on economic growth through 새마을운동. And then also about the quality of life, we can see that many Gyeongbuk population are also in agreement with improving of the quality of life as the goal for 새마을운동. So I believe that the policy should also be targeted this way. And then next question was about what should be the new 새마을운동 spirit. So we gave a list of about 30. And then in Gyeongbuk, overwhelming favorite was collaboration, followed by reconciliation, unity, volunteerism, and so forth. So we can see that this was more about the community spirit. I'm sorry, so that was nationwide. So for nationwide, so that was more for the reconciliation, collaboration, and so forth. And then in Gyeongbuk, then collaboration, reconciliation. So again, this was also more geared toward the community spirit. So I believe that the expectations from both nationwide and Gyeongbuk results are that 새마을운동 can perhaps contribute to reviving the community spirit and social coherence. And then next was about what is important about 새마을운동 and also what we need to do to grow 새마을운동 further. And then the top answer was development of philosophy and projects compatible with the new era, and then raising the interest of residents and resident spiritual reform, and also was about having more active promotion and publicity about 새마을운동. So we can see that people want to see renewed philosophy and projects for 새마을운동 and also more communication. And then next question was about the hindrance to the growth of 새마을운동, and the top answer was the 새마을운동 goals and project contents are incompatible with the current times, and then lack of residents' awareness and interest. So we see that there is a need for us to redefine or renew the goals and the projects as well as the philosophy related to 새마을운동. And then any comments on 새마을운동? So this was an open question, and again, the overwhelming answer was that there has to be new need and new ideas for 새마을운동 that are more befitting of the new era, and also more active PR is needed. So they're interested and they know about this, but then they want to see new direction set for 새마을운동. And if based on that we can have more active communication, then there is a likelihood that 새마을운동 could be more promoted nationwide as well. And also, so that was the result nationwide, and then in Gyeongbuk as well, then the responses were similar, that we need to have new needs, new ideas, and also the need to be compatible with economic growth of today. So then now, if I may sum up the results, then we can see that there is awareness of 새마을 and its achievements and high evaluation of current 새마을운동. They believe that it has contributed to economic growth, and also male and older generation have higher awareness. And then also about the current 새마을운동, then people think that it is not being implemented well, and also Gyeongbuk has a higher negative response in comparison to the nationwide view, and that is probably because there is a higher expectation in Gyeongbuk province, and falling short of that, then perhaps Gyeongbuk people have a let's say a lower evaluation of the 새마을운동 because of that today. And then in terms of the implications, then About 40% is positive to strengthening Semaurundong, and also about 45% were positive to participate in the Semaurundong. And then about the awareness of overseas Semaurundong and need for its expansion, there was a high rate of respondents who are unaware that Semaurundong is being implemented overseas. Gyeongbuk is more unaware than the national average, and there was a demand that if we could have stronger publicity, then it would be better known. And then about the current issues of the local community, then aging of the population, living environment, natural environment, and vulnerable local economy were some of the issues that were picked. And then in terms of what we need to do through Semaurundong, improving sound citizenship of residents and sense of community and revitalizing the local economy. So we see that it is necessary to reorient Semaur in a manner that helps to practically solve problems such as an aging society and local economic doldrums. And as for the new Semaurundong spirit, what people prefer are reconciliation, collaboration, volunteerism, and sharing. Again, it seems as if people want Semaurundong to contribute to community spirit. And then now, what are the important factors in growing Semaurundong today? And it is about new philosophy and project development that are compatible with the current era, as well as enhance interest of residents. And in terms of the hindrance to Semaurundong growth, and it was the goals and project not being compatible with the current times and lack of residents' awareness and interest. Then, as for the way forward, what do we need to do? We need to strengthen Semaul education so that the awareness and favorability of youth on Semaurundong could be stronger. And also because many of the respondents in their 20s tend to think flag and logo as the reminder image of Semaul, meaning that they only think of this as the remnant of the past. So we also need to make sure that they understand that this is an ongoing project. And to do that, we need to more actively publicize and promote Semaul to encourage public participation. And also because most people thought that the outdated goals and projects are the biggest hindrance to Semaurundong's growth, so we also need to reorient, redefine the goals and the philosophy of Semaurundong to be more compatible with today's society. And also we need to have the goal of enhancing happiness for the population so that everyone can live more happily in the community. So for this goal, then we need to reorient the goals of Semaurundong to lead the initiatives of the current times. That is all. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for being punctual, and thank you very much for the very good presentation. So that was about the population's current perception of Semaurundong and how we can further develop it into the future. So thank you very much. So that was about the findings from the survey, the nationwide awareness survey, and also set of recommendations on how to develop the Semaurundong. So thank you very much, and we will move on to the second presentation.
The second presentation will be by Dr. Kwon Young-min, and his title is Research on Strategic Plans to Promote the Digital Semaurundong. Your presentation, please. Good morning. Whenever we host a forum, I was always a part of the audience, but it's quite an honor for me to stand on stage today as a presenter. Today, I would like to discuss research on strategic plans to promote the digital Semaurundong. This is based on a report that I am heading in order to make a policy recommendation. We are close to completing the report, and I have the honor of presenting the contents today. So this is the content of my presentation today. As you're well aware, ever since the late 1980s, we have gone through an era of computerization. Companies started to use OAs, introducing computers, and then in the late 90s, we opened the era of the internet. People who are able to use the internet and people who are not people who are able to use computer programs such as Word or Excel, and those who cannot continue to see a divide in their lives. And the same pattern is now true for metaverse. So there is a difference between people who know about ChatGPT and who do not. This is the same for AI and computer technologies, both hardware and software. So we live in an era that is super connected. As you're well aware, Korea is an ICT powerhouse. And after COVID-19, we have seen that utilizing ICT has become a new normal. Before COVID-19, we only imagined non-face-to-face meetings or whether such non-face-to-face meetings were necessary, but now non-face-to-face platforms have become the new normal. With the continuous progress of digitalization, we see a growing disparity in the quality of lives of different people. For example, my father is not able to make a reservation for a train ticket online, so I have to do that for him. Or he could go to the train station, but there are never seats available. Or when he goes to a restaurant, sometimes now restaurants only receive orders using kiosks, and he's not able to use kiosks. And internationally, we see that digital technologies are being used in many advanced countries, but in more developing countries, we see a less developed infrastructure for ICT. Recently, KOICA has conducted a project for the underprivileged regions of Myanmar using ICT. So ICT is now also being used for rural development. The governor of Gyeongsang-buk-do always emphasizes cultural and digital 새마을운동, so we are making the preparations to make this come true. And so you can see that digital 새마을운동 is winning interest both in and out of Korea. In the process of conducting research, I came across the fact that there was very limited research on 새마을운동 using ICT. Domestically, Gyeongsang-buk-do started the Internet 새마을운동 in 2001, and it was a very limited way of utilizing digital information for 새마을운동. And internationally, we see that ICT is being used for international development cooperation. Related to 새마을, we have seen that there was a research by Dr. Kim Jin-yeon in 2016 covering ICT 새마을 Globalization Promotion Plan. So the research that we are conducting at our research institute is focused on exploring new strategic directions for digital 새마을운동 policies so that it could enhance the effectiveness of 새마을 ODA. The research that I conducted covers policy suggestions for Korea and around the world. So here you can see the flow of the research. And in Korea, there was already research on internet-based 새마을운동, but it was not all that successful. It was an ad hoc project. And so we analyzed the issues related to internet-based 새마을운동. And currently, because metaverse is in the limelight, how are we going to utilize metaverses to introduce 새마을운동 virtually? Overseas, we took a look at case examples of ICT in international development cooperation to come up with implications for 새마을운동. If we take a look at the theoretical background, according to the Choi Jin-gun research in 2005, there is a research on Gyeongsang-buk-do's internet-based 새마을운동, and it had 5 tasks, for example, promoting one PC per resident or facilitating the distribution of PCs, encouraging residents to maintain farming diaries, and other movements, as well as 5 major tasks related to villages and residents. But there are issues related to this research in 2005, which was discussed in a 2007 research. And this research points out the lack of appropriate promotional activities and the fact that it was not able to approach the actual digital divide and that it did not take into consideration the local conditions and also the lack of appropriate education and training, as well as the fact that it had limited impact on income improvement. And so in 2007, the research suggests the following for improvements. For example, involving college students to provide training and education for internet utilization in rural areas, and also to create an internet-based 새마을운동 forum for promotional purposes, and also to introduce e-commerce and business consulting through website development because it was not directly linked to income improvements. From 2001 to 2011, the Ministry of the Interior and Safety conducted 9 projects in the rural areas to enable e-commerce using high-speed internet networks. Currently, we have created a new platform for e-commerce, and so e-commerce based on websites are no longer utilized, and so we need to find a direction to improve these projects. And the only research concerning overseas utilization of ICT for 새마을 was conducted by Kim Jin-yeon in 2016. He has a doctorate degree in engineering, and I think that's why he was very forward-thinking. In 2016, I was involved in a project in Vietnam, and at that time, there were no Wi-Fi in rural Vietnam, and I'm sure that it was even worse for other countries. But this research was great, but the timing was off. It was very difficult to implement his research results at the time in 2016. And this is a project for underprivileged regions of Myanmar, and this is an ongoing project. So we are actually utilizing an app so that the villagers could upload their pictures, and that could actually lead to the recording of results, and all of the information related to community meetings would also be delivered using this app. So this is the policy proposal that I would like to make. In the past, 새마을운동 was about living well together, but digital 새마을운동 should focus on enjoying together, so that we will be able to resolve digital divide so that everyone can enjoy the benefits of technology together. So that should be the direction of digital 새마을운동. The underserved communities, regions, and individuals, whether in Korea or outside of Korea, should be able to enjoy the fruits of digital technologies together. It should boost income in rural communities. It should also lead to digital inclusion so that everyone would be able to utilize digital technologies and enjoy the fruits. This actually will be a solution to issues such as the aging of rural regions, and we can also establish smart villages in developing areas and developing countries using digital 새마을운동. This is on a larger scale. So in 1970, we started projects to improve the communities, the environment, and the infrastructure. But these projects are still ongoing, but these projects are fragmented across various ministries. So we need to have a single control tower, just like the 새마을운동 of the 70s, so that a single ministry could be in charge as the control center. We could have smart agriculture to enhance income for rural areas, and we can also have the Ministry of Science, Technology, and ICT participating in projects by the control tower. So all of these individual projects should not be fragmented across government ministries, but they should be brought together into a single control tower. That would mean that preventing theft and preventing environmental pollutions and preventing damages by wild animals can be brought into a single network so that we can improve the living conditions of rural areas. So what can 새마을 do? We can provide opportunities for intergenerational connection. We have the Youth 새마을 Forum here in the Gyeongsangbuk-do province, and the Youth 새마을 Forum can take a look at some possible ways to foster intergenerational connection, and they can help the elderly and the underprivileged groups to learn how to use mobile platforms for reservations or kiosks to make their orders at restaurants. We also have platforms for online businesses, and sometimes people utilize YouTube or videos, and so we need to provide more support to enable people to utilize these technologies. And by providing this type of training and education, then this would facilitate income improvements in the rural areas. So coupling the hardware provided by the government with the training provided by 새마을, then that would mean that we can impact the lives of people in the rural areas. Here you can see some pictures from the project that I had conducted in Vietnam this year. Well, we asked the Vietnamese government on whether they have digital platforms, and in Vietnam they already have a demonstration project. This is an area called Hue, and from October they have a monsoon season, which leads to heavy rainfall and subsequent floods. And so what they need to do is monitor the location of homes, and what they did is to install cameras near the homes so that they can have a control tower to see if the homes are safe. And then if the homes are not safe, then they will be able to provide early warnings. This picture here is related to smart centers. And this actually is an example from Gyeongju in Korea. And here you can see the mayor of Gyeongju participating in a town hall meeting. And this can happen not only within the city, but across the world. And if you have a headquarters in a certain city, but you have employees around the world, then you can actually utilize this type of digital platform to bring everyone together into a single platform instead of taking business trips around the world. And so in order to enable this, we need to install smart TVs in village centers. But for example, in Africa, sometimes Wi-Fi is not available at village centers. And so I do believe that this will improve in the near future. So that is why we started with Vietnam, because they have good internet connections. And with improvements in infrastructure, we will also be able to extend these projects to regions in Africa as well. In the past, when we had education and training, we would invite people to Korea, or we would send our trainers to the local areas. But ever since COVID-19, we have learned to work and learn on virtual platforms. And so currently we are utilizing studios, as you can see in the pictures. And this studio lectures can then be played in any area of our choice. And if we have established LMS, then we can upload all of the training information that can be used as needed. This is the same for income improvement as well. So in Vietnam, where I visited this year, as I mentioned before, they have digital centers, and there are co-ops, cooperatives that participate in certain villages, and these cooperatives, they're able to upload their products and prices using this type of e-commerce support systems, and this will enable e-commerce for any products that are produced in villages. And if you're part of cooperatives that 새마을운동 supports, then they would be able to upload their products as well. And we can also share information on market prices, which means that it could help farmers make predictions about their possible income. So we believe that through the research that we are currently conducting, we would be able to develop a theoretical framework for digital 새마을운동, and we would also be able to evaluate opportunities for applying digital technology to 새마을운동 through various case studies. We will continue to propose digital 새마을운동 projects, and we hope to take a look at the direction and feasibility of future digital technology for 새마을운동. Thank you very much. Korea has a strength in ICT, and so utilizing this strength, we can combine that with 새마을운동, and thank you for your detailed presentation on this very timely topic.
네.
Thank you. And now we will move on to the third presentation to be delivered by Dr. Lee Dong-hyung. Dr. Lee will discuss the regional era 경상북도 International Development Cooperation Policy Direction. Thank you very much. As just introduced, I am Lee Dong-hyung from the Gyeongbuk Development Institute. Now, I am not an expert in 새마을운동, but I am here to deliver this presentation, and especially together with the foremost experts in Korea at this Semaul International Forum. So let me say what a great honor it is for me to be here. Now, the topic is not just limited to myself. In other words, this is about the 새마을운동 and also especially about the international development cooperation organizations that are in the region. And for these international development cooperation organizations in this 경상북도 province, now getting together, we thought now the world is changing very rapidly then from the 경상북도 province. Don't we also need to set a new direction for international cooperation as well as ODA? So that is why we got together to discuss the new direction for ODA from 경상북도 province. This discussion is still underway, and I would like to briefly tell you about the discussion so far. So again, the topic is Regional Era 경상북도 International Development Cooperation Policy Direction. So the contents. I see that the text is a bit broken because the font is not right. Now, the current government is trying to come up with a new ODA strategy that befits the Korean international stature. And in this, the government is also focusing on the region's role. Now, for the Gyeongsangbuk-do province, as you would know, thanks to the 새마을 운동 as well as the 새마을 projects, it was able to enhance its international profile. And more recently, in pursuit of building a respected Korea-led Gyeongbuk in the regional era, we have also established a international cooperation department, and we are trying to attract talent from overseas as part of our efforts to enhance our interactions with the outside world. And in this process, the 새마을운동 as well as the agriculture as well as other projects. So based on the technologies and know-how in these fields, we need to further collaborate. We need to further strengthen our collaboration with other developing countries. So what we need is an ODA program that is also in line with international diplomacy effort. So then based on this, we concluded that we needed to come up with a new direction or a direction that is unique to Gyeongsangbuk-do province when it comes to ODA as well as international development cooperation. So then what precipitated this is about the environment changes, so both internal and external. And also some of them have already been mentioned earlier, so I'm going to skip. And then also in terms of the definition of ODA or the scope, it is also getting broader. So not just economic cooperation, but also diplomacy, culture. So we see that the scope of the ODA is also becoming broader and broader. So now it's not just about project or project to project, but then it's also between policy to policy and also department and department. And also the participants are not just limited to the public sector, but then also being broadened into the private sector as well. And the private sector's role continues to become even more important. Now with the governor Lee Cheol-gyu, now the Gyeongbuk province has also come up with a policy of promoting significant transformation in the regional area, so that we can achieve a new leap forward for Gyeongsangbuk-do. So we have come up with 8 initiatives, and we also come up with the Regional Area Policy Bureau to work on K local projects, KU city project, among others. So in all these policies, what is the idea that underlying all these policies is that non-Koreans or foreigners or overseas talent, so they are all included in these policies as stakeholders. So if we can also link this to overseas talent, then not only for Gyeongsangbuk-do province, but then also for the other regions, they can also, so even inside the smaller municipalities in the Gyeongsangbuk-do, they will be able to continue to expand their overseas interactions. So the 새마을운동 has already spread to other countries. So then as the leading country in 새마을운동, and also as a leading region of 새마을운동, we have been leading the efforts for the 새마을운동 globalization. So I'm sure that you are probably more aware of these than myself, so I'm going to skip. And then in terms of the major projects, there have also been quite a number of projects already for over 20 years. And in terms of the related organizations, then these are leading organizations not only inside the region but also nationwide. So for example, the Semal Foundation as well as the Gyeongbuk Techno Park and Gyeongbuk International Development Cooperation Center as well as the Yeongnam University. So these organizations, these institutes are the ones that are partaking in and also very much dedicating themselves to further developing 새마을운동 and to further globalize 새마을운동 as well. Now, based on this, then, what are the achievements? Now, for the Gyeongsangbuk-do ODA project. So when it comes to the Gyeongsangbuk-do ODA project, we believe that we can pretty much equate this with 새마을운동. So this has become a brand value for ourselves. Then also it has contributed to the development of a distinctive regional ODA model. And as a result, it also helped elevate the international standing of Gyeongsangbuk-do province. Now, having said that, still, there is some negative perception associated with Semaul Undong. So, for example, that it is pre-modern or it's exclusive, and also it is a one-sided support project for developing countries. So these are some of the negative images associated with Semaul Undong, which we believe can be hindrance against winning popular support. And also inside the Gyeongsangbuk-do province, and also inside each department, each division, and also inside each ministry, they have different projects working in silos, so not enough linkage yet. And similarly for other organizations as well. So we do not have the control tower, and we do not have a strong institutional foundation yet. And that is why there appears to be low motivation and engagement among residents. So these are some of the limitations that we have identified, and based on this, we have also come up with the recommendations for the future. So what do we need to do? First, we need to innovatively adapt ODA in response to changes in the environment. Again, we need to maintain and develop global brand value of Semaul Undong as a leader of this movement. Now, in the Gyeongsangbuk-do ODA, if we are to exclude Semaul Undong, then this would not make sense. So we need to renew Semaul Undong to be right for the day. And then we also need to identify projects for mutual growth so that we can improve local dynamism through mutually beneficial ODA projects with recipient countries. Last, we need to establish a sustainable Gyeongbuk ODA framework, a framework for global contribution and elevating international standing. Now then, the question is, for Gyeongsangbuk-do ODA, what are our next steps? What do we need to do? Now, so far it had been focused on ODA, in other words, overseas development aid, but then we have to move on to international development cooperation, in other words, public diplomacy. Second, we need to strategically promote collaboration with partner countries, considering mutual understanding and capabilities. In other words, we need to also work with not only the hub countries where through which we can strengthen our overseas cooperation, but not only that, we also need to select priority countries for the region, for the Gyeongsangbuk region as well, to promote mutual development with Gyeongbuk province. And by doing so, we also need to develop the talent, explore talent development and economic cooperation initiatives to foster mutual growth with our partner countries. And last is gradual advancement towards sustainable development. Now, what this reminded me of was that, of course, now we need to have economic interactions. But then, when we say we are going to have win-win or shared existence, then what needs to precede all else is mutual understanding. So we need to have gradual development so that we can continue to build up mutual understanding. Now then, these are the directions that we have defined. So we need to pursue Gyeongsangbuk-do leading global coexistence and shared prosperity in the regional era. And then another another direction is new leadership in SEMA international development cooperation, pioneering digital transformation. So for this, we have also discussed many different experts, including the president of the university, Che, on what kind of Semaul Undong would be right for today. So we have also talked about the new definition of Semaul Undong. So then we have also come up with the three strategies under this. And first is to be people focused, because more important than anything else is people. So it has to be human centered. The international development cooperation has to be human centered. And second, it has to be innovative. So international cooperation that is innovative. And third is for shared existence. So coexistent international development cooperation. So these are the three concrete directions that we have set, and then we have also defined 4 strategic tasks. But let me also give you the disclaimer, this is still work in progress. So based on the SEMA Foundation, this is going to be the Smart SEMA International Development Cooperation. So what you have listened to in the second presentation is what this is about. In other words, not just about one-sided giving. Like for example, digging up wells or digging up reservoirs, but now of course I understand that today many partner countries are requesting cooperation in ICT and digital, so it has to be mutual. And then second is about nurturing global talent. As I mentioned earlier, what is the most important is people, so we need to develop and share global talent. And third is creating an international development cooperation model for coexistence and common prosperity. So then for this shared existent development model, then from the development center under the Gyeongbuk DP could be in charge of this question. And especially because in the future I believe the soft power is going to be the key in international diplomacy, then also for Gyeongbuk province I would say that our cultural heritage is one of our biggest strengths. So then inside province I believe that the culture foundation can also play a very important role. And now these are the more detailed tasks under each strategic task. But then most of them have been touched upon in the second presentation, so I will skip. And then next is about nurturing global talent. So the second strategic task is to nurture global talent so that we can share the talent. So it talks about attracting outstanding talent. So this is what sharing talent is. So to do that, then Gyeongsang province, Gyeongsangbuk-do province has to establish itself as the hub of global talent. And to do that, then we need to foster SEMA talent trusted by the global community. Then we need to establish Gyeongsangbuk-do as an innovative hub for training talent for global international development cooperation. And by doing so, the talent that we need in our region, and we can also attract the global talent. Now, for the talent inside Gyeongsangbuk-do, for them to work overseas, that is also the sharing of the outstanding talent. So this is about adding more details to this task. And then the third is about creating an international development cooperation model for shared existence and common prosperity. So for example, launching the Gyeongbuk Global Contact Center as a way of establishing a support center to foster cooperation between Gyeongbuk province companies and universities in developing countries. So by having the Gyeongbuk Global Contact Center, then this will help Korean businesses set up presence overseas, but also to explore the market as well. And we can also build Gyeongbuk's global industry academia collaboration network. So of course we can also have a broad direction, but then especially for the direction for the economic cooperation for Gyeongbuk province and also the direction for the industries in this region. So based on the current status as well as the directions that are important for Gyeongsangbuk-do, we can select the right countries to start with in terms of this network. And what we need is to have international development cooperation through cultural communication. So this is about sharing Gyeongbuk's traditional culture with the world and building partnerships through culture and arts exchanges. So sharing sharing Gyeongsangs and also sharing the other countries' culture. So for example, more recently, Egypt and Mongolia, so they are trying very hard to digitalize their artworks. So that is where we can cooperate. And then also with Gyeongsangbuk-do province, there is also the Silla Dynasty project digitalization. So I believe that such a technology can be leveraged in implementing such projects with other countries. And also, in conjunction with this, we can also work toward developing the right talent. But of course, no matter how good they are, no matter how good such projects or tasks are, we need to have the framework or the foundation to undertake them, to implement them. So we need to have the institutional basis for this, meaning that we need to enact an ordinance for Gyeongsangbuk-do so that we can create the right institutions. And then we also need to establish a new central organization to lead the way. But what is more important is we need to create a consultative body. Of course, it is currently now in the form of a task force, but then to make sure that we have the right cooperation and also to be able to identify the areas of cooperation, then we need to have a consultative body. And now, for example, the Korea Foundation or some similar organization that would be in charge of Gyeongsangbuk-do region, then that would be the appropriate form of organization. That is all. Thank you very much. So that was Dr. Lee Dong-hyung from the Gyeongsangbuk-do Institute, and he talked about some of the Gyeongsangbuk-do's activities to support 새마을운동. Thank you, and also the way forward. Thank you very much.
Let us now go on to the three panelists. We have heard all three presentations, and so now we would like to go to our designated discussants. Please bear with us as we rearrange the stage.
자, 토론자분들 나와 주십시오.
We would like to invite the discussants to join us on stage.
예, 아까 말씀드린
As I have mentioned before, we have three designated discussants joining us today, and they will be giving us their feedback on the presentations as well as their personal input. So we will be speaking in the order presented in the agenda. We will start with Professor Seo Jae-ho of Pugyang University. So I understand it's 5 to 7 minutes, yes. Good morning. I am Seo Jae-ho, teaching public administration at Pugyang University. Thank you very much for this invitation, and thank you for this opportunity to discuss the presentations. So when we think of the word 새마을, personally, because I grew up benefiting from 새마을, when I was a boy, I always went to school listening to the 새마을 song, and I saw my village improving. I saw the roads being paved, and I saw income increasing. And so the word 새마을 should not remain just a part of our past history, but I hope to see 새마을 very much alive even today. And that is why today's forum is even more meaningful. If we take a look at the awareness survey of 새마을, I believe such surveys will definitely contribute to the development and direction of 새마을운동. And so periodically having these surveys and advancing the methodologies will certainly contribute to the development of 새마을운동. Let me now comment on the contents of the survey itself. There are some points that we need to pay close attention to.
I would just like to make some observations about the questions and then make some suggestions. Now, in terms of the interpretation of the results, I believe that more caution is needed. So, for example, in terms of the current perception or awareness of the 새마을운동, then I believe that there are some points where we cannot be so conclusive. So, for example, I believe that it was also because the speaker had to summarize. So perhaps he had to skip quite a lot. But then in terms of the activation of the 새마을운동, and then equating this to the assessment of 새마을운동, I believe that perhaps it would be a bit premature. And also the low awareness of 새마을운동 nationwide does not really mean that the assessment itself is negative. So that was my first impression. And then the next point is, now in reporting the result of the survey, the presentation was divided mostly between nationwide and Gyeongbuk average. But then now, as I mentioned earlier, 새마을운동 is something that is ongoing in Korea. We also have the organization for the 새마을운동, but then among the young generation, I'm sure that there are quite a lot who don't know that the 새마을운동 is still ongoing, led by the 새마을운동 Center. So then I believe that for the 경상북도 to create of course, 경상북도 has the 새마을운동 Foundation, and it is trying to globalize the 새마을운동. But I believe that we need to also have a generational breakdown between the awareness and perceptions on the 새마을운동. So if we could have that result as well, then we could probably glean better ideas and implications of about how to develop 새마을운동 into the future. So I believe that by doing so, the results of the survey that were presented today will be made all the more meaningful. Now, because of the limited time, then let me also share with you some of my ideas on how the 새마을운동 Foundation can further develop the 새마을운동 movement. Now, I believe that for the 새마을운동 itself, it has to pursue two goals. One is to renew 새마을운동 inside Korea. And the question is then how we can do that so that we can gain bigger impact inside the country. And second is how we can share and spread the success experience in Korea to other countries where it is needed. So I believe that those are largely the two trajectories where the 새마을운동 has to move forward. Now, with that goal in perspective, then what we need to look at is not just about the projects or the goals of the 새마을운동 themselves, because I believe that they are already existing. So I mean, if there is the recipe, then we can just find the right recipe for it. But then I think what we need to identify is where 새마을운동 is needed the most. But in the course of trying to discover what is needed, now in the past it was more in terms of the space, in other words, which village. But then, at least inside Korea, I would say that in terms of the space, then there has been a balanced development already. So then, based on that, then I believe for the 새마을운동 to keep developing, then in the future it has to be more people-centric development model. So I would say that the Semaurundong in the future has to be more about people development. And the second point is now what worked in Korea in the past. In other words, what helped develop the rural areas of Korea, what was effective in such economic development. So that is Semaurundong, and that was the success model of the past, and then also where we are successful now. So as Dr. Kwon has mentioned, so that is ICT. So perhaps we could also combine this ICT advantage to Semaurundong, then perhaps it could put a stronger drive to the globalization of Semaurundong. What was invented and developed in Korea, and perhaps by adding ICT, then perhaps you could come up with a better development or growth model. So that is all. Okay, thank you very much. And we will now move on to the next panelist.
경남대 교수.
We will be inviting Professor Lee Yang-soo from Yeongnam University. Pleased to meet you. I am Lee Yang-soo. I teach Semaul International Development. I see many senior professors here today, as well as many students from our school. So it's a great pleasure to see you here, and at the same time, I feel quite cautious presenting before such a prominent audience. I would like to thank the Semaul Foundation for enabling this opportunity. And as someone who teaches and learns Semaul Undong, it feels like we are being well supported by the foundation. Well, first, Dr. Lee Sang-woo talked about the national level awareness survey. I don't think there has been any surveys that have covered 1,200 people across the nation. And so I don't think I've seen many cases of such large-scale surveys. So I hope that you will not stop at utilizing the survey results within the foundation, but I hope that you will share the results with our university as well. The message from this survey is that the people of Korea and the people of Gyeongsangbuk-do province, it shows what they think of Semaul. In particular, in Korea, we have a mixture of great evaluations on the Semaul spirit, as well as the contribution to rural communities, which was then reaffirmed by the survey. Having said that, this was an awareness survey of Semaul Undong, and it was the first round of surveys, and I'm sure that the research will continue, but I hope that you will also have surveys on any shortcomings and room for improvement for the Semaul Undong, and I hope that you will be able to include those results in your research. Having listened to Dr. Lee's presentation, what came to mind is that in the province of Gyeongsangbuk-do, as Dr. Lee Dong-hyung has mentioned, the biggest changes compared to the 70s and 80s is that we are seeing a great increase in residents who were foreign-born. Statistics show that we are no longer a homogeneous country because the OECD has a standard saying that if over 5% of the population is of a different race, then you are no longer called a homogeneous country. That we have over 5% or 2 million people living in Korea. And where do they usually live? They usually live in rural areas or industrial parks. And Semaul Undong has contributed to harmony and economic development. If we take a look at Gyeongsangbuk-do province and other provinces as well, the environment in rural communities is very difficult, especially because of labor shortages. And who are filling in these labor shortages? The residents who come from abroad or the laborers who come from abroad. And so I don't know if this would be possible, but based on your surveys, I hope that you will also be able to use the results to provide basic 새마을 운동 training to the residents living in Korea who are not ethnically Korean. In Korea, there are 2 million members of the 새마을 community. That is 5% of the total population. So 5% are members of the 새마을 community. I believe it's probably the largest community in Korea. And of that 10%, so 200,000 are 새마을 leaders. So the 새마을 leaders in Korea should take more interest in multicultural families as well as migrant workers. And we need to make sure that 새마을 leaders lead the way in bringing them into our society. And so from that perspective, I do believe that the presentations made today will definitely contribute to harmony and rural community development. And however the world changes, the three basic spirits of 새마을 운동, which is diligence, self-help, and cooperation, will always live through time. And so diligence is about you, self-help is about you, and cooperation is about us. And so even if the times change, these three values are very important and they are universal. And Dr. Lee also mentioned that he also believes that the 새마을 spirit is the most important. I would also like to mention that there probably is negative opinions concerning 새마을 운동, and I welcome those negative opinions. Some professors who majored in economics mentioned that 새마을 운동 did not contribute to the development of rural development, and I respect their opinions as well. And I don't believe that they are completely wrong, but we need to remember that there are people who have different thoughts about the 새마을 운동. Because we know for a fact that 새마을 운동 contributed to the development of rural villages, and I believe that listening to other opinions is a very healthy way of improving our society. Well, we will also create a youth network of 새마을 운동, and next year we will have general elections. And because we have 2 million members for 새마을 운동, I think there will be some politicians who might try to leverage the 새마을 community for political purposes, and this is something that we need to make sure does not happen. Concerning the second presentation by Dr. Kwon Young-min, well, he provided us with very sophisticated ideas about digitalization of 새마을 운동. And I could relate to his proposal, in particular in countries in Africa. The African villages are geographically very different from Korean rural villages because Korean rural villages are close together, but African rural villages are quite far apart from one another. And so that is why we need to utilize digital platforms, and that will help African rural communities participate in 새마을 운동. One of the most important strategies for 새마을 운동 is the participation of the residents. So without that participation, we cannot have results. In this information era, I do believe that digital 새마을 운동 is very important. But having said that, I do have a concern. Of course, digital 새마을 운동 will make it convenient for networking. So if we use networks and platforms, it will be much more convenient. But will it be directly connected with actual results of 새마을 운동? Because we need to continue to think about genuinity and
sustainability. If we use ICT, it's very convenient, but we also have to take a look at if we could have practical results with mutual understanding. And so even if we utilize ICT, we need to make sure that we bring in empathy and cooperation. And if we are to facilitate networking, infrastructure is very important. And so we need to make sure that infrastructure is a precondition to digital 새마을운동. And we also have to take a look at who will conduct education and training using what kinds of methods. And so if we could solve all of these issues, then digital 새마을운동 will definitely be a great choice. This session is titled Going Local, Residents' Happiness and 새마을운동. We have a lot of PSP students here today. I do hope that what I mentioned this morning could be applied to your respective countries as well. Thank you very much.
네, 감사합니다. 이어서
Thank you. And then we will move on to the next panelist, Mr. Choi Young-tae from Daegu Daily. Yes, great to meet you all. Now I'm from the Daegu Times, so in English it's Daegu Times. So I am an editor at the Daegu Times. Now I wrote my PhD in 새마을운동, focusing on the media report. So the media, the press editorials around that time. So from the 6 major dailies, nationwide dailies, regarding the 새마을운동, so I wrote my PhD thesis analyzing such editorials. And I could see that the media editorials, so the press reports, played a very important role in encouraging and disseminating the spirit of 새마을운동 nationwide. So there were so many articles, and then also just the editorials alone, I mean, there were over 400. So the global 새마을운동 and the 새마을운동 today, so those who study the 새마을운동 today and trying to disseminate it in your own countries, then I believe that you would also have to think about the relations with the media, with the press, and also how to cooperate with them if possible. And if I may share with you one anecdote, so from the 1970s, so from the early 1970s to 1979, which was the height of the 새마을운동, and that was my school days. So my elementary to middle school, high school. So I also witnessed the elements of 새마을운동 because I am also from the rural area. And in those days, I could really see changes almost on a daily basis. So I would go to the city during the school period to study, and then I'll come back during the school break, and I could see that there are new bridges, new buildings. So yes, indeed, it changes not only individuals' lives, but also the life of the entire community. It could change the entire village, the life in the entire community. It was a joy. It was always a pleasure for me to come back home. I always felt happy about coming back home to find out new changes. And in that time, there was no electricity in my village. And around that time, there was like only 20%, 25% penetration of electricity in rural villages at that time. So when I was in high school, my village finally also had power connection. And then at the end of the 새마을운동, then about 90% of the villages were connected to electricity. So now with the electricity, then the villages became drastically different because it meant that they could now have household appliances. Not only that, but they could now also use agricultural equipment on the field, meaning that the labor was less needed and also the productivity was drastically improved. And then also the rice seed, they would plant the improved seeds with much higher yield. And then now also in my home, now after the harvest, now usually the rice would be, so if you are to place them inside the room, then we were not able to reach the ceiling with our piles. But then now after the improvement with higher productivity, then we had no more space to store the rice because the harvest was so much higher, the yield was so much higher. So I still remember vividly how happy we were with the entire village. So then now this Semaurundong, it's about today and also about tomorrow as well. So then I was listening intently to the presentations about Semaurundong of the past, of the present, and of tomorrow. Now I share with you some of the anecdotes of the past, and that is to make the point that the Semaurundong is about yesterday and today as well. And of course, for the Semaurundong that we're discussing today, it's about today and tomorrow. So I believe that going into tomorrow, then Semaurundong, the global Semaurundong, is going to probably lead the way. Then, so thank you very much for the very good presentations. I would just like to add some of my commentaries. So now then, Dr. Lee talked about the nationwide survey results, and yes, there have been a number of such surveys in the past, and I see that this is the latest survey, and I was able to observe some changes which were quite meaningful. In particular, I would say that the symbolism has changed. So in the past, Semaurundong, they would be reminded of the leader or the president or the Semaurundong flag. But now people think more about the spirit of the Semaurundong and also its contribution to development and growth. So I would say that they are encouraging changes. And then about the activation of Semaurundong, so how we can promote Semaurundong. So what we need to do is to change the nature or the purpose of it, and also the leading organizations or the responsibility of Semaurundong have changed over time. So then, of course, there are bound to be changes in the perceptions about Semaurundong. Now, in the past, for Semaurundong, then there was a strong sense that we are the owners of this undong. So all of us thought that we are the owners of this Semaurundong. But then now these days, now most believe that Semaurundong is exclusive only to those who are part of the organization. So in other words, the Semaurundong organization is leading the Semaurundong movement. So then those who are outside this organization believe that it is only optional for them to take part in this or not. And then now, for those who are trying to transplant this in your own country, then I hope that you will remember that in the beginning of Semaurundong, especially in Korea, then we all thought that we were the leaders or that we are the owners of Semaurundong. And then also the need to develop the right content and goals of Semaurundong that are right for today's age. Yes, I believe that that is an ongoing challenge. But now what is encouraging is that more from individualistic thinking, people now want to revive the community spirit through Semaurundong. So reviving the community or the community spirit perhaps can be done by Semaurundong, which I believe is a very positive sign. And then also what Mr. Kwon talked about the digital Semaurundong. So of course this is something that we must take to move into the future. In other words, in the 70s, the time of the Semaurundong, we also utilized all of the technologies that were available at the time, and that is how we made such achievements. So then now the Semaurundong, global Semaurundong of today, of the 21st century, then of course it again warrants the mobilization of all available resources, the latest resources, meaning that the Semaurundong, the digital platform. Now, this is something that must be thought together by Korea as well as all the other partner countries. Now, I have also been viewing the Korea rural broadcasting quite a lot, and then of course they don't talk about Semaurundong, but then I can see new attempts like the smart farm, or so a lot of the new attempts, new tries, utilizing digital technology in the rural areas. So I believe that that can be one leverage that we can use to continue to globalize 새마을운동. Then, of course, ICT, and of course, Professor Lee also made this observation. But yes, based on the ICT and utilizing digital technology, so we need to come up with a new model for 새마을운동 that utilizes such latest technology. But then what is the most important is that, of course, the technology is the latest technology of today, but the spirit or the values of 새마을운동, so that would transcend the time, because the technology can change all the time, but then the basic values and the spirit remain unchanged. Then how are we going to define the values to be held by the 새마을운동? So then, for example, let's have co-prosperity, or let's aspire for better values, higher values. I believe that they can transcend the changes in time, so I hope that we can keep sharing with them. Then also what Dr. Lee talked about. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but then I'm mindful of the time. Yes, then I shall be brief. Then regarding the third presentation, so then yes, as the leading province of 새마을운동, and then also as the province that has led the way in globalizing 새마을운동, and now it has the awareness that it is also going to lead the way in terms of ODA based on 새마을운동. So yes, you mentioned that various organizations in the province have gotten together to think about the new way for 새마을운동. So for example, the smart 새마을운동, and also co-prosperity, coexistence, and global 새마을운동. So yes, I believe that you have touched upon all the right directions. And now the homework is to find the more detailed tasks so that we can come up with a more practical model. And let me conclude my discussion here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At other conferences, I always am a very strict timekeeper when I'm a moderator, but the contents of the discussions today was so meaningful that I was not able to be that strict with the time. We are a little bit behind schedule, but we do need to go back to our speakers for their feedback as well. So let me now go back to the presenters concerning the opinions and questions from the discussants.
All right, so now then regarding the 새마을운동 survey analysis, so we only have the frequency analysis so far. Then, so for example, the significance or the generational breakdown analysis. So yes, we will keep that in mind so that we can have a more thorough analysis of the results, so that we'll be able to have a better understanding of people's awareness and perceptions about 새마을운동, and also about the policy. So going beyond, and also in terms of the tasks, so going beyond the space, but to be more people-centric. Then also combining ICT, and also providing more training for global human resource development, so that we can also further promote 새마을운동 both inside and outside of Korea. So we will take them into due consideration. So thank you very much for the good observations.
Would you like to continue? Yes. Professor Lee Yang-soo talked about the preconditions such as infrastructure that we need to confirm. Yes, we will definitely take that into consideration. In terms of infrastructure, we hope to work with international organizations to make sure that the right infrastructure is in place. 새마을운동 not only utilizes technology, but as Dr. Che has mentioned, we need to make sure that we maintain the universal 새마을 spirit, and so that will continue throughout our digital platforms as well.
Right, so as was observed by the panelists, for the municipalities, international development cooperation direction, yes, it is only now defined at the high level. So I take it that you all agree with the high-level direction. Of course, we still have to work out the details so that we can come up with the tasks or contents that would be meaningful and practical. Thank you.
지금 사실
Well, actually, we do need to give some time to accept questions from the floor, but we are quite pressed for time. I am sorry that we're not able to open the floor for questions. But if you have any questions that you feel like you must ask at this point in time, we will accept maybe one question, but we would like to ask you to also utilize the time during the lunch break as well.
Okay, thank you for your cooperation. 자, 저 이제
So we now need to close session 1. We had 3 separate presentations, but they were certainly closely linked together. Awareness surveys, utilizing ICT for 새마을운동, and also support from the Gyeongsangbuk-do province. This all boils down to a new momentum and direction for the happiness of residents. I'm sure that you have many opinions and questions to share, but please utilize the networking opportunity during lunch. Thank you very much for your participation. This brings us to the end of session 1. Thank you very much. I am sure that session 1 provided various insights to our audience today, and I'm sure that we have been able to learn many points for execution in the local areas. Thank you very much for this very fruitful dialogue. Thank you once again to our moderator, discussants, and presenters. Another big round of applause, please. Thank you very much. Please take your seats. This brings us to the end of session 1. And I'm sure that many people are feeling quite hungry. Let me now provide housekeeping remarks for the lunch venue. For the overseas participants and presenters, we will be providing lunch at the first floor of the lecture hall. Lecture hall is towards your left, so you need to walk to the left once you step outside of the main door, and we will certainly have staff ushering you to the lunch venue. Please follow the usherance of our staff to the lunch venue. For the Korean participants, we do have a restaurant within the theme park, and please make sure that you take your lunch vouchers with you. For the international participants, please follow the guidance of our staff to the lunch venue. The afternoon session will begin at 1 o'clock, so please take your seats by 12:55. Thank you very much.